Hello, welcome back to another episode of Not the Same, the podcast that brings you true stories of real people sharing their personal testimonies of transformation. I'm your host, Rachel Heinberg. Thank you to those of you who have reached out to me, whether in person or via email. It is so encouraging to receive feedback from you. It motivates me to keep going. I never tire of hearing how this podcast has helped you or someone near you. If you haven't reached out yet, the best way to do so is through the dedicated podcast email. That email is notthesame.cfm@gmail.com. Introduce yourself, tell me where you're from, and let me know how this podcast has impacted you. I'm also looking for new stories all the time, so please share your ideas as well. If you are just now finding us, I'm so glad. I hope this impacts you and becomes a new favorite. We are available on all major platforms, including Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, so like, subscribe, follow, and share. You can also leave a positive review to let others know it's worth their time. Last episode was a great time. I was able to sit down with Busiswa Mpake. It was a joy for me to hear how an encounter with God and the love of his people really are the solution for the problems we face. I'm looking forward to today's guest. Danielle Tiervlei is a dear friend of mine who has been helping her husband pioneer a new church in the area of Lenasia in Soweto. For that, they were longstanding members of the church here in El Dorado Park and oversaw numerous ministries. She was instrumental in welcoming me personally into the church. I am blessed to be here with her and to let her share her remarkable story with you. So, Danielle, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me, Sister Rachel.
I appreciate it. So, as usual, start a little background, kind of how you grew up, how your home life was.
I was born to a very young couple. My mother was 16, my father was 23. And obviously not married at the time. So my mother and I were living with my granny, and my father, who had lost his parents at a very young age, was living with adopted family.
Did they kind of just take him in?
Yes, I think they were neighbors.
Okay.
And when his parents passed on, the boys went with this family where my father was staying, and his sister went with a different family.
Okay.
They got married the day before my 5th birthday.
Okay.
Yes. So what I can remember in that time, I think most of the time I was living with my great-granny, my grandfather's mother.
And what was the circumstances around?
I really can't remember, but I do know that I was spoiled a lot there, and even being my father's first child. And so I think from there, they didn't really like me much because of how much she loved me. Yeah, but I don't remember much.
You said you don't remember much, but your mom at this stage, was she in your life?
Yes.
I mean, she was there with you.
Yes.
So it was you and then your mom. And
so I think I would only live there while they work. But weekends after work, still with them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was the situation. Not like them taking me and raising me. Both of them were always in the picture.
Okay.
After my parents got married, we lived in Innerdale.
Okay.
With my mother's sister, and she was looking after me while my parents were at work. But I don't remember much from that either. And then we moved to Extension 6. Now, the house in Extension 6 was the adopted mother. It was her house. So we were kind of just renting there.
Okay.
And what I can remember is my mother wasn't working at the time. And in that time, my sister was also born. There's a 6-year age gap between the two of us. So basically just my mother at home, my father working. Weekends, my father would be busy with soccer. Either he would take soccer club from his workplace or a soccer club from the local area to play somewhere, coming home late. At that time, there wasn't really much alcohol. I don't remember like my mother drinking, my father just a little bit. So that time was just very quiet. Obviously, my father not being around very much during the week because of work, and on weekends because of the soccer thing.
And you started school at that place?
Yes, because I remember the first few days of school, I would walk up with my father to the school because I didn't have transport that time. So yeah, very nice, very comfortable. I just remember the relationship wasn't good between the adopted mother and my mother because my father is very hardworking. He started work from a very young age. He didn't complete school because he had to have some kind of operation. After that, he just didn't go back to school. So in Extension 4, he worked in a takeaway shop until he got a security job and then an office job. So he was very hardworking.
He's always been.
Yes. When my mother and I weren't in the picture, you can imagine where the money was going to. She first comes into the picture and then now me. So obviously the resources are not going where it used to be. Yes.
Yeah.
I think there was even where they said, I'm not his child, but he wasn't having none of that. Because of that, this is now where they started involving witchcraft.
Okay. And this is his adoptive parents?
Yes. I never knew the father, but only the mother.
Okay.
And there was 2 sisters that I knew of. So just a little bit back, while we were living in Innerdale, my mother was pregnant with my sister. But at the time, she didn't know. So just one day, she said she found a centipede in a bed. She didn't think nothing of it. And then she told a friend. Her friend was half colored, half black. So I think her friend knew something about it, and her friend took it to a lady. And the lady said to her, you are pregnant and this is meant for you to lose the baby. And she didn't know she was pregnant at that time.
Whoa, that's creepy.
And so anyway, fast forward, we're living in their house now. So she had come to the house, the mother, but at this time my mother started working. So it was just my sister and I and the helper.
And obviously your sister didn't.
Yes, she was born. And so the night when my mother came home, my sister was very sick, projectile vomiting, everything. And then my mother asked who was here. And then the helper told her, the mother.
Okay.
So she immediately knew, okay, this woman did her things, whatever she does again. Not long, my parents then bought a house in Extension 9 where they're still living today. And we moved there.
Okay.
So this is now where I start remembering my mother. She started working at the post office, the big one. Before it was just her hanging out with mostly family, no friends.
Isolated community. Yeah.
Now she had friends, work friends, and she worked night shift. There was a time where my aunt was also living with us, and her daughter and my sister are not very far apart. So they would work together, go in late and come back morning hours. My father started drinking more also. Weekends he would be out, he would come back late. Most of the times growing up, it was like that. Weekends, we'll go with my mother to her family. They'll party, they'll drink to whatever, and then maybe go to a club afterwards. We stay home. And then my father comes home, finds us at home. She's not there, asking us where she,
So it started getting a bit more chaotic.
Yeah. Or sometimes the people would come over to our house. And at that time, my father, he wasn't a people's person. So any functions, anything, he would never be around for it. So if my mother's family were at our house, or even if it was just a friend, and he came home, there was going to be some kind of commotion.
Okay.
So whenever things were happening at our house and it was bedtime, I would always tell my sister to sleep in tracksuits. Because once the commotion starts, we're going to be grabbed out of bed and my mother's going to walk somewhere, and she's going to take us. Or it will be like, no, stay with your father, no, go with your mother, no. And so we don't want her to go alone. We want to be prepared.
Dressed properly.
Yes, if it does happen. So for a couple of years, it went down like that. We went to my cousin's 21st birthday party. That day, she also never came home. We went home, she went her ways. So in that time, she always used to visit opposite where my granny sister lived. And, they always used to use her, like when she gets paid, like not come home for the whole weekend.
I know it's difficult because your parents are in church right now. But part of what makes your story important kind of involves them a little bit.
Yes.
But during this whole time, your mom's working. She's working crazy hours, living her own life, involved in her own things. And now this is creating, of course, imbalance at home. Now your dad's starting to drink more. Where did that leave you guys?
Doing our own things.
And how old were you at this time?
About 11, there around.
And your sister would be 5, just now starting school.
Yes. Also, there was a time where we used to live with my granny in our house. So it was my granny, her husband, and the 2 youngest children.
And that is?
Reggie and Edsley.
Okay.
All of us were living in one house. So on weekends where my parents weren't there, my granny was there. So we were still taken care of in a sense.
Yeah.
But as we got older, we were left to ourselves a lot during weekends. I wouldn't say I was a very outgoing person because I would just be at home most of the time. The freedom obviously played a big role in what happened next in my life.
So during this time, middle school years, I mean, this is your puberty, teenage years. So explain what was happening.
Mondays would be tense because it's the vibes from the weekend. Either my mother wasn't there or, whatever happened the weekend, there's vibes from there. So then Tuesday, Wednesday, I remember there came a point in my life where I didn't like Thursdays because when I come from school on a Thursday, my mother's friends will be there. There's even certain songs that when I hear it, because I already know what's going to happen.
So you're already geared up for the weekend to be chaotic.
Yeah. Even I remember working out Easter weekends. I'm like, if she starts drinking today, on Friday, Good Friday, and Saturday she won't drink. Sunday she'll maybe drink again. Monday, so I used to do that like every year.
Calculating.
Yes. My father wasn't one to sleep out. He wasn't a club scene either. So he'll just do his thing and come home late or whatever. Sometimes I used to wonder how he would get home because the state he was in. And when there was a weekend when none of this was happening, it was really good. Like if we had my mother the whole weekend. I remember one day I said to her, it was a New Year's Eve. I was in grade 8. And my sister and I were alone at home on New Year's Eve. And we were already in bed. I'm in high school, so, all my friends are calling me Happy New Year. And like to me now, like that sucks because, I'm in bed and they out having fun and doing whatever. I remember I said to her, next year, can you be with us on New Year's? And she made it a point. There's a lot of things where I can look back and I think when we said something, they actually made it a point to have it done. I don't know, was it to make up, if I can put it that way?
Yeah.
Because there was things you could ask for it today and tomorrow you'll have it. You don't know where the money came from, but it was just there. If you ask for something and they'll go out of their way to get it for you.
So looking back, you probably think that was because of where they were at in their life. They knew they're doing their own thing. A lot of parents do that. It's their way of, I'm sorry, hopefully, like you said, they'll make up for
they'll never say no. And I didn't like going out much, but when I did ask, they wouldn't say no. That's just how it was, I can't say that we ever went to bed hungry. It was comfortable, but looking back, I can tell whatever they made happen by doing things. You understand?
Yeah, as an adult, you always have that hindsight of, oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
So during this whole time, you said you stayed with your granny as well, and she came to church. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you were exposed to Christianity.
Before we came to this church, we used to go to the Ebenezer church. So on Sunday mornings, my father would bring us up to my granny's house, and my cousins and I, we would go to that Ebenezer church. We go to Sunday school there. That was only Sunday mornings. One of my school teachers was a Sunday school teacher there. So, you want to be seen. You're like, I go to church. And yeah. And then when the church started up in the park,
okay,
that's when her and my cousin started going. So obviously then she told us and we also started going. I remember the park like a little bit, but then we started coming here also.
And your parents?
No.
Just you with your granny?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I said before, I only came to get my granny off my back. So as long as I was here on a Sunday morning, I ticked that box, and the next time I saw her, I wouldn't get shouted at.
Okay.
For many years, it went on like that. I would just come to church, not interested in anything that's happening here. When I was about 12, I used to be involved in the Sunday school plays and all that. But obviously, as I got older, I just came on Sunday mornings.
You talked about freedom. What did that entail?
So I had a lot of sleepovers at my friend's house, but there it was controlled, but also the parents were chilled. So there was boys. We were smoking oka pipe, sometimes drinking. But I felt like it was normal.
Yeah.
Because sometimes if you look at people's situations, they somehow blame that on how they end up. But sin is sin. plain. Like I said, I wasn't very outgoing. And
Well, sin is sin, but you also, when you're small, you think all this stuff is normal.
Yes.
It doesn't feel like it's wrong, even though outside you're like, okay, that was wrong. But at the time, you're just, I guess this is what all families are like.
We would drink, but my mother, she knew a lot of things. If it was happening around her, it was fine. I think a couple of years ago, my father actually asked me, did I drink? Because he never ever saw me drunk. That's how I used to be. I also didn't like the feeling of being drunk because I wanted still to be in control of my body. So if I got to that point where I felt like I'm losing control, I would stop.
Wow.
I never blacked out. I never had any of those experiences because I just didn't want to feel like that. So he didn't know, but my mother knew because she allowed it around her.
Yeah.
You understand?
So she saw.
It wouldn't be in front of her, but it would be around her. And so down the line, my friends started dating. And then, I was craving for that man. I want a guy, Obviously, there were boys, but not boys that I felt like this is somebody I can let meet my parents or, so it was always just
crushes.
Yes, they, nothing serious. And then in 2005, I was 15. My aunt, where she was working, she said, oh, there's this guy. He's so well-mannered, handsome, and I really like him for you. And I'm like, oh, okay. So he called me and then...
Wait, did she give him your number?
Yeah, and a photo. And so he called me, but he's Afrikaans speaking. And I'm English. So obviously his English wasn't up to my standard.
Yeah.
Let's just go back a little bit. The same mother, my father's adopted mother.
Oh, okay.
So the one night, all of us are in bed already. We sleeping. And then something just says to me, look out of the window. And I look out of the window and the gate is wide open. It hasn't been locked or anything. And my parents' cars are parked at the back. So we usually just use the back door. We never use the front door. So I just open the front door to go and close the gates quickly. And then I open the door. What do I see? This worm. And
like the big long black snake.
Yes. And it's like doing like a snake movement when I get to the door. And so my mother's like, just burn it. And already her mind takes a back. And even my father, because I remember him saying to her, don't start.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And it's not that he didn't believe in it because I think he thought there was something bad. They had cars stolen. They had bad things happening to them. And they went, I don't know what's the name for it, but to good sangoma or healer or whatever to get rid of it. Yeah. So it's not that he didn't believe it. He just didn't want to hear it's his family.
Yes.
And so a different day in that week, my mother slept in our room. They had a fight or whatever. We had the beds with the mirror in the middle. No? So my mother was sleeping with my sister, sleeping on the side. And I woke her up and I'm like, can you hear that? So it was as though something was walking up and down. It's like I could hear distinctly.
Like footsteps.
Like dragging.
Okay.
And only later on, she told me she just said yes because she wanted me to go back to sleep, but she didn't hear anything. And the Saturday of that, I was with my friend. She was a hip-hop dancer. We went to some club in Midrand. Before we left there, I don't think I drank that night, or I must have, but not much. I had called my mother just before we left, and I said, we're about to leave now. She was also out. So she's like, do you want me to fetch you? So I'm like, no, we should be home, because we hired a taxi. I knew she was drinking for her to now come this far. Yeah. I said, no, it's fine. On that day, I just bought a nice new thick coat, thick one. So I said, no, we'll be home. I'll let you know when I'm home. We drove and we met up in an accident.
Oh, wow.
And so I was sitting in the middle row of the taxi by the window, and the taxi flipped and it skid on the roof for a couple of meters. I ended up in the back, like in the boot space, and one of my shoulders were like out of the window. So it was like scraping. The jacket was gone. Nothing happened to my shoulder.
Wow.
People had iron rods put in their legs. People had stitches. People's faces were...
road rash.
Yes. Broken limbs. Sister Rachel, the only thing that was wrong with me was my hip got hurt. Not broken. Nothing.
Just like bruised up.
Yes. Nothing was wrong with me.
Wow.
So after this accident, my mother felt what happened there in the week with the worm, So she took me to a lady.
Okay.
And this lady said, I was was meant to die in that accident. And also, I'm meant to not do well in school, to fail and to cause arguments between my parents and for them to split because of me. So, I mean, how many years is this now into their marriage and this lady is still busy? So anyway, she gives this water to drink.
For you to drink.
Yeah. And when we get home, immediately my father knows what's it for and where it comes from. You understand?
Is he approving?
No.
He's disapproving.
Okay. Yes. Like I told you, it's not because he doesn't believe the things. I think it's because it was his family and he just didn't want to believe that.
Yeah.
So eventually I spoke to him and I'm like, why is she doing this to us? And I was even crying because if I died, they said I was supposed to be a slave to her in the
afterlife.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then at school, I must do bad and all this. So that started working on me like, why? Why is this lady doing this to us? And I spoke to him and I said, can't you speak to her?
So when you drank this, did anything happen?
I did drink it, but
there was no difference of anything.
I didn't complete it and I never went back.
Okay.
So in that time, this is when my aunt gave my photo and now this guy started calling me. And remember I said the language was immediately put off for me. You know? Yeah. Because I was busy studying, obviously with this in my mind, you know, this lady wants me to be a failure. And now this guy is calling me all the time. I'm like, I don't want to tell him he's bothering me, but he's bothering me. But when I saw his picture, I'm like, no, you can bother me.
Yes.
And so we were speaking. That was like just before his 21st birthday.
Okay, wait, let's pause right there. So he is how old?
5 years my senior.
So he's 20.
Yeah, I'm 15.
You're 15.
Yeah.
Which in the US would be illegal, but in South Africa. So you're busy with school and now this grown man is bothering you. And now you think, oh, he's cute. He can bother me.
So we start speaking. My mother knew we were speaking, but my father didn't.
Okay. So how did this lead into actual dating? When did you become like a couple?
So my aunt had something at our house. They call it stokvel. So this is where you sell food, you sell alcohol for profit. So she had invited a lot of people from her workplace to come. And then he wasn't going to come. It was like a last minute invite for him. So he came and I met him the 1st of June, 2005. From there, we just started dating.
So you'd never seen him. You'd only been talking on the phone before that. Okay.
And the next day he went to work. But I remember like we were on the phone for so long. And my father kept asking me, who's that you're on the phone with? I'm like, you're just a friend. And so my aunt was living here in Extension 3. So weekends he would visit her. And then that's how we would go on dates.
Okay, because you were doing it on the sly.
The family knew, but my father didn't know.
I see. So you would go to your aunt's house?
Yeah.
And he would come by your aunt's house?
Yeah.
And you guys would go off?
Yeah. And so there was just something in me. I never gave everything, you know, but when I met him, like, yo.
It was different.
Yes. I felt comfortable. You know, there wasn't that in the back of my mind, is just going to use you. But 3 months into us dating, that's when
And this is the only person you've ever been with?
Yes. So now it came to a point where every weekend he'd be here. And sometimes he wouldn't even go home. So eventually now we had to speak to my father. He now knew about him because on my 16th birthday, he was there.
So from June to December, at some point you finally were like, okay, Dad.
My mother.
Oh, you made your mother do it?
Yeah. Yeah. And in the beginning, he didn't want it, but my mother was totally for it. So he would come weekends, he would visit. It was no longer my aunt's place. It was now straight to our house. And then sometimes he wouldn't even go home. He would go to work from here and come back.
Your parents were okay with that?
Yeah, because we were not sleeping in the same room. And so eventually I was in grade 11 now. And then one day I came home from school. My father and my mother was also at home. And so they said they wanted to speak to me. They're like, Ashton asked us if he can move in because he was working for a courier company. He had always gotten a lift with the courier company guys. So now the company was against it. It was going to be difficult for him to get to his job every day. He didn't speak to me about it. He went straight to my parents and he asked them if he could move in. And they said yes. They told me afterwards. And so obviously for me, it was going to be nice, but I just also felt like, am I now ready for such a in your face all the time and like loving together, like we're not grown. In my sinful nature, I'll say that there's some things I knew, like loving with a man, It never crossed my mind that no, sex before marriage is wrong, but I won't have 2 children without being married. So a skewed view, you understand?
But that again goes back to what was normal, how you were raised.
Yes. So he started living with us. And obviously, although we weren't in the same rooms, whatever freedom we had.
For sure.
And so in my final year of school, that's when I fell pregnant. It was the 15th of February. And the day before, my father had bought us chocolates, Ferrero Rochers. The next day, I woke up feeling so sick. And I said to myself, it's those chocolates. I'm never going to eat those chocolates again. And I just left it at that. But after, I didn't get my period. So then took a test, was positive.
Did you know immediately to take a test?
When I missed the period, yeah.
Okay.
And so this was like early in the year now. I had said to him, I don't want to have the baby. Just thinking, what are my parents going to say?
And how old were you? 16 or 17?
17. I just turned 17 in December.
Yeah.
And so I'm now looking through the newspaper, where can I go, to have an abortion?
Was that your first thought?
Yeah. What are the people going to say?
Okay.
That was it. It wasn't about me at that time. I just thought, what are my parents going to say, my granny,
So your goal was to keep it secret from everyone?
Yes, the abortion, the pregnancy, everything. Yeah. So at that time, only him and I knew. I was hassling him like, you need to give me the money to have this done.
What was his opinion about it?
Totally against it. There was one Saturday, we woke up pretending to go on a date and we went to town and I'd found us in the newspaper.
Like a clinic?
Back door, even if I can think about it. So we go to the building and we get there and there's screams. Ladies are screaming in the reception area. All the guys sit there. The girl goes in alone and I go in, I fill the form. But as I'm filling the form, I'm crying. And the atmosphere between the two of us was tense. We weren't speaking the whole right there. And so he sits down because he can't come in with me. And I'm filling the form and I'm crying. And the lady does the sonar. And the first thing I see is the thumb in the mouth.
Wow.
Clear as day. And the lady says to me, you are 20 weeks. And I'm like, 5 months? She says, yes. I'm like, okay, how much is this sauna? She says, it's 150. I get up, I wipe myself. I go out to Ashton and like, can I have 150, please? I pay the lady and I say to him, let's go. As we're walking out, I'm like, I'm not going to do this. Obviously, he's happy because he was never for it,
Yeah.
So now everything changes. We are talking, trying to figure out what's going to happen. Because now we have to tell my parents, we have to tell his parents.
So let me just pause you real quick. I know it's a little emotional, but the fact that you saw your baby changed everything. I mean, a 10-week baby, you could try to convince yourself, oh, it's nothing. But a 20-week baby, there's no convincing that it's anything but a baby.
I just don't think I would have gone through with it because I was delaying a lot on my part to go there.
Okay.
You understand? It would be like every month when he got paid, let's go. But then we don't end up going.
Would they have done it still at that 20-week
I think
mark?
They would have, because like I said, it was a backdoor thing. And how the ladies were screaming there.
Okay.
You understand? And so from there, I'm barely going to school because I'm not feeling well. Almost every week, there'd be certain days I'm out of school. I was really sick. They call it morning sickness, but I would vomit in the afternoon when they were not home. And I would cook supper for all of us. And then when it comes to supper time, I'd be like, no, I ate while I was cooking. I would buy the bed still and just hide it. So
your mom never asked you?
But obviously when it came out, she said that at one point she saw my school pants was untied and she thought maybe I'm just gaining weight because now it was winter, so it was easy for me to hide. Always in big clothes, but my stomach wasn't that big.
How did they take it?
So I went to doctor. This is now our family GP. He knows the family. And then he said to me, you need to tell you are 6 months now and this test you need to take and everything you need to get ready for the birth. And so they came from work and I had to tell my mother. She was in the bath and Ashton had to tell my father. One instance I remember, I said something and it really hurt her. I said to my aunts that I will never be like my mother. I will not have a child when I'm young. And it really hurt her because, yes, she had me, but she kept me, she took care of me.
Yeah.
So only later, I also now realize what I said hurt her and for me to end up exactly like that. And so that night I told her, she obviously was crying, and then Ashton told my father. So remember earlier I told you my father was against him, but after the pregnancy, my father changed. Not to say that he kept that attitude like not liking him, but he was more welcoming. I think they're very similar in their ways, like their responsibilities, they take it, they hard work. My father and Ashton.
Yeah.
But then Lavandra was born in October. And 6 days later, I started my final matric exam. So I opted to be induced so I can have the baby before starting exams. So when I went to school to do my exams, my father was looking after him. My father wasn't one for babies. He is so scared to hold a baby or do anything with like.
But he agreed so you could go take your...
And I passed, but like I said, the situation at home wasn't nice. Obviously, I would still do the clocking into church thing just to get my granny off my back. So he would also come with me to church. And so there was one Sunday I stayed home and he came to church alone. That time it was still Pastor Paloko.
Okay.
He said the pastor was preaching, and then God really dealt with him about us just shaking up. Then he's like, we can't do this anymore. I just thought to myself, you'll get over yourself. This is just something you're saying.
Yeah.
I saw a future with him. So it's not like I didn't want to do it. But I thought, no, man, it's just you talking. It's not going to happen. So anyway, it kept like, this is wrong. We can't. At that time, it would have now been the change over with Pastor Paloko going, Pastor Bennett coming in.
Okay.
Also during this time, I had lined up a job interview. So we spoke to Pastor Bennett, please pray. And Pastor Bennett said, yes, I can pray, but the situation here is not right. God's not going to bless whatever is happening here,
So up until this point, had you ever prayed a sinner's prayer and actually...
Never.
Okay.
Even I asked one of the ladies afterwards, as I started getting more involved in church, I said, why didn't anybody ever approach me? Only one in all that time. And she said, it was my face. Like, I can swear them away from me, That's what she said to me. But in all that time, no.
Wow.
Never.
So he challenges you.
Yes.
Like, you guys need to make this right.
So he had messaged my uncle to say that the couple who spoke to me on Sunday about getting married, tell them to come on Tuesday. We will sign. So obviously now we tell my parents. They say no, just get engaged. So we say no, we're going to get married.
And because that's the way of things here culturally is no, get engaged.
It's okay to have a baby. Yeah.
And everything takes time. No, plan it.
Yeah. We said no. And then we signed the Tuesday. They came, they witnessed for us. We had a supper. So we got married on the 8th of July, 2008. Lavandra was 9 months old. So the day we got married, we got saved.
And so that is the first time that you prayed.
And me even raising my own hand to go and pray. Because it was a revival. But Patrick Johnson, it was
that was a Tuesday.
Yes.
Did anyone tell you to, or you just finally were like, okay, now that I'm getting married, I'm making a decision. I'm starting over. I'm going to actually do this.
Yes.
Because you had heard the gospel.
Yes. But also then this life is not for me. Because what does it have to offer me? Like I wasn't a smoker. Not for me.
Yeah.
Try drugs, but not for me. So all these things is not for me. Then what is for me? So immediately when we got married, at that time, we moved far away, but it was in our budget. It was newly renovated apartment. So we didn't need furniture. We didn't need anything. So it was convenient. But it wasn't convenient for coming to church. So we had moved in there August. And then, the struggle back and forth. Sometimes we'll come on a Saturday to outreach, sleep over here so we can come Sunday to church. Eventually, my uncle told us there's a space open up here at Shaim's. And then February, we moved in here. And from there, that's when we could now attend all the services, be involved and everything.
So would you say in February, or once you moved closer, is that when your lives shifted dynamic-wise?
Yeah, being more involved, trusting God, just after we got married, Ashton, he just started the job at Vodacom at that time. So now he's going through all these changes and people are recognizing him, for his hard work and what's happening in his life. So even Muslims are now giving him money and saying, no, just take this for you, this new journey. Start off on a good note, financially okay. But obviously that's happening in our lives, but still the same with my parents. Yeah. And I remember when I was pregnant with Kiara, my parents had separated. My father came and he loved her. And I remember it was a Father's Day. I invited him, but he didn't come. So I just got some takeaway and I took it to him. And he was sleeping in the garage. And June is cold. And then when I saw him like that, I couldn't handle it. I'm like, he has a house. Yeah. Why should he be living like this? Both of them were obviously being very stubborn. That was June. He still lived there until December. So Kiara was born. At that time, they switched now. She moved out and he moved back home because her car was stolen out of the yard. It wasn't safe. And
they're still looking out for each other.
Yeah.
So going back to your story, you and Ashton, now you're serious. You guys are faithful. You're starting to get in all these ministries. If we fast forward, Lavondre is 16 now. We got here in 2021. And at that time, you guys were super involved. You were running the nursery. You were running the kitchen. Ashton was on the council. He was the head usher. I mean, integral to the church. At what point did that desire to go out and preach happen? Was that before or was that more recent?
It was before, but in our minds, it wasn't clear in a sense of our commitments. It's just amazing how God works because we knew all the time that it's something we need to be doing. It's the call on our lives, but it just never worked. Obviously, Ashton had spoken to Pastor Bennett to say that I do feel called, but it just didn't work out. There was always blockages. There was just one day where he had spoken to Pastor Heimberg and he came back to me and it was so simple, so simple. We're like, why did we never ever see it in this way? Because the past conference was the best conference I've ever had. God spoke to me, God dealt with me. It was the best. Years before that, I just remember because people would ask, you're so long in the church, and it's like, we don't want to do it. It's like, what am I doing here? Because even to a point where I'm like, this is not for me. I don't belong here. I'm not good enough because why am I here? But I'm not doing what our fellowship is about, I felt like I'm holding him back. Come Friday night, you're happy for everything that God is doing, churches are being launched, but it's supposed to be you, Yeah. And then there would always be this somber mood. Going back to when he spoke to Pastor and he came back and like, this is what's going to happen going forward. There was no blockage. There was nothing.
Was it just direction?
It was direction,
Okay.
But also there was a service we had. You remember that miracle service,
Yes.
What is it that you want us to lift up? His was, I want to preach.
Wow.
He told Pastor, but there's a blockage. But it was just confirmation because he was praying about it and Pastor came to him and said, Ashton, when are you going? So that was the confirmation, to say that it is time. I mean, he had spoken to Pastor Bennett, so obviously Pastor Bennett approached him and always was like, no, I can't now. I can't, And you'd always feel like a disappointment because why can't you? And so when that conversation happened, and we spoke about it, it was like, no, let's do this, man.
So you felt the freedom to
Yes. And even coming into conference the first time, like being out, everything was so different. Like I didn't feel unworthy anymore because now I know we are doing what God has called us to do.
Yeah.
And God has really helped us even going into Lenasia. During last year's conference, Pastor Ruby preached and it was on the offering and he said that the offering we give that night, we need to link it to something. So obviously knowing we going out, that's what we linked our offering to. And God has really been helping us.
So last year, which would be 2023's Bible conference, September, you guys were sent to Lenasia and you opened your church November, right?
26th of November was our first service.
So the 26th of November. So that is 10 months you've been open. And obviously we just had our conference just the end of August, beginning of September again, 2024. Ashton gave a report and Sunday mornings, several times you guys have been over 50, 3 services a week, outreaches a few times a week. Would you say you're seeing the fulfillment of your dreams?
Definitely. And just doing what we know to do. Because I remember speaking to somebody in the beginning, somebody from this church. And then I'm like, our free days are Mondays and Thursdays. So they're like, so your schedule is the same as ours? I'm like, yes. What we saw here is what we went out and did. Under the leadership here, when we went there, it's hard work, yes, and it's new because now you're on your own, but it's not something new in the terms of physical work because you used to it in your mother church. So anybody in your mother church, get involved, stick close to the pastor, stick close to the pastor's wife, because when you go out there, that's something you cherish forever. That's how God helps you. Yeah. It really has been amazing. You know, sometimes I just go back and I look at the night we were launched out, that prayer, the words spoken over my husband, the day of our farewell. You know, pastor said, there's going to be a lot of broken girls. I'm not perfect in any way, and my upbringing was not perfect, but there's some things you're like, God, is this what people out here is going through? Yeah. Like, you're not their parent, but you want to love. Even grown women, you want to assure them that you are enough. You don't need that. You know, God loves you. Yeah. So any abuse of men, don't take it. Yeah. You are enough in his eyes, you know. There's been days where I cry because I just marvel, like, God, all this that you're doing, man. And I get to be a part of it. You know, when people share testimonies, people come. We've had a guy, he was almost shot. The gun jammed. We had a broken geyser. We prayed about it. We fasted about it. Somebody came out of nowhere. Small things, you're like, God, I'm a part of that. And people even come, they've been to churches, but before this church, this was our lives. We've never experienced this, but now we're in this church. Ashton always preaches to say that this is not a work of men. It's God's work that we are doing here. So they might be used to bigger. And so always we make it a point, whatever is happening here in elders, or bring them so they can see the bigger picture. And even after conference, all the testimonies we got. Yeah. We're designed to want to belong to something. And I feel like that so often, that what I am a part of is, in the words of my husband, the words of his pastor, and his pastor, the greatest thing on earth. It's just like, we get to do this, and it's amazing. It's not about us only, like the lives that can be touched. Yeah, it's incredible. And we were just speaking about it last night, actually, to say that this is only Lenasia. Imagine all the other places where these things are happening, and they need Christ. They do. I want to close right there. I think that's a great place. I really appreciate you sharing your testimony, and in this forum, we never know what to expect. It gets emotional, we go up and down, but hearing someone's testimony or sharing someone's testimony is priceless. So I appreciate that so much. As always, I want to say thank you to each and every one of you listening. Without a listener, the story can't be heard. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our previous episodes, please share it with someone. Don't underestimate the power of a transformed life. Lastly, if you are not a Christian or were but have turned away and you want this for yourself, it's possible. John 3:16, a very familiar scripture, says God sent his only son, Jesus Christ, to pay the price for our sin. Pray, acknowledge your sin, recognize Jesus paid the price on the cross for that sin, and just ask him to forgive you, and he will. Until next time, this is Rachel Heinberg, and you've been listening to Not the Same.